Elon Musk voiced his frustration over the FAA's delay of Starship Flight 5, stating, "We will never get humanity to Mars if this continues. Starship isn't just another rocket, it's a crucial step in space exploration and reflects the competitiveness of the US in the industry." The delay had led to sharp criticism from Congress, with many questioning the FAA's process and its role in slowing down such vital missions. Is it time for the FAA to step aside? Find out more in today's episode of Great SpaceX. Over 3 months have passed since Starship's Flight 4, and anticipation continues to build for Flight 5. However, the FAA has delayed this milestone until late November, frustrating SpaceX and those who see Starship as a critical component of the US's future in space exploration. As SpaceX pushes the boundaries of aerospace technology, this delay is a significant obstacle. The FAA's role in the delay, particularly its cumbersome regulations, has drawn ire not only from SpaceX but also from Congress, leading to heightened tensions and calls for reform. The root of the issue lies in the Part 450 regulations, which went into effect in March of 2021. SpaceX and other commercial spaceflight companies have faced licensing delays due to this regulatory framework. In a September 10th hearing of the House Science Committee's Space Subcommittee, several officials voiced their frustration with the FAA's inefficiency. SpaceX's Bill Gerstenmaier warned that the entire regulatory system is at risk of collapse. He described how the process has stifled progress, directly impacting companies like SpaceX that are driving innovation in space exploration. Dave Cavazza, president of the Commercial Spaceflight Federation, further criticized the system, saying,
"The way it is being implemented today has caused severe licensing delays, confusion, and is jeopardizing our long-held leadership position."
Cavazza emphasized that the process is taking years.
Companies get stuck in an endless back-and-forth process.
These delays pose a real threat to the US's standing in the global space race, as other nations, particularly China, continue to make strides in their own space programs. Pamela Meredith, chair of the Space Law Practice Group at KMA Zuckert LLC, echoed these sentiments, pointing out the
with lack of certainty, lack of transparency, and significant delay
within the FAA's licensing regime. Even Representative Brian Babin, chairman of the subcommittee, expressed his concerns, saying,
"License processing under the new Part 450 process is moving at a snail's pace."
This inefficiency is seen as a major roadblock to U.S. space ambitions, particularly with NASA's goals to return to the moon and eventually land on Mars. Adding to the chorus of criticism, Representative Haley Stevens noted,
"We are in a bureaucratic soup. We know we're not getting to the moon unless we have commercial spacecraft. So something's not working here."
Stevens' remark highlights the reliance on private companies like SpaceX to achieve NASA's ambitious goals, further underscoring the urgency of reforming the current regulatory processes. Despite these strong criticisms, FAA Associate Administrator Kelvin Coleman attempted to defend the Part 450 regulations during the hearing. However, his defense was met with resistance from several officials. Representative Rich McCormick, in particular, pressed Coleman on the FAA's role in the delays, stating,
"You're in charge. You make the difference. You get to determine how fast these go through. And if what you're doing is not working, you need to change."
McCormick's statement highlights the growing impatience within both the private and public sectors, as the FAA's inefficiencies continue to hold back vital advancements in space technology. The delay of Flight 5 is not just a setback for SpaceX, but represents a broader challenge for the US's leadership in space. As SpaceX and other companies push the envelope of what is possible in space exploration, outdated regulations threaten to slow progress. With the global competition intensifying, particularly from China, many are calling for an overhaul of the FAA's regulatory process to ensure that the U.S. remains at the forefront of the space race. Without swift changes, the U.S. risks falling behind in this critical arena, leaving many to wonder if the FAA should be kicked out of the industry, as some have suggested, to pave the way for faster, more efficient progress. Recognizing the potential threat to national progress, Texas Congressman Keith Self recently announced on X, formerly Twitter, that he sent a letter strongly encouraging FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker to accelerate the agency's environmental review of SpaceX's project in Texas. He also affirmed Texas must be allowed to continue to play a vital role in America's space enterprise. This tweet included the content of the letter in which Keith Self highlighted the importance of SpaceX's Starship program. He began by addressing its purpose. I write in regard to SpaceX's proposed Starship/Super Heavy Vehicle increased cadence at the SpaceX Boca Chica launch site in Cameron County, Texas. He then emphasized the significance of Starship to the nation's global leadership. Our nation must maintain our commitment to leading the world in the responsible and constructive use of space through an innovative commercial industry, and U.S. leadership in this area is dependent on an agile, efficient regulatory system that promotes and enables rapid commercial innovation. A key point in the letter was the need to increase the frequency of Starship launches. Increasing the cadence of Starship launches from Starbase from 5 to 25 per year is critical to the development of super heavy lift and global mobility and logistics technology, as well as NASA's Artemis program to return American astronauts to the moon ahead of China. These concerns are well-founded. SpaceX has long been the standard bearer for maintaining the U.S.'s leadership in space, thanks to its Falcon rockets and Dragon spacecraft. In the future, Starship will carry this responsibility. Congressman Self also pointed out the competitive threat from China, which is advancing quickly in its space endeavors, including ambitious plans to land a crew on the moon and establish a lunar base. Only SpaceX, with its ability to rapidly iterate and launch, can currently ensure that the U.S. stays ahead. This is why the proposal for 25 launches per year from Starbase, along with plans for 44 flights in Florida, is crucial. However, environmental and regulatory hurdles are causing delays, exacerbated by recent controversies, including those involving SpaceX and CNBC. Congressman Self candidly addressed these challenges, stating, "As a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I have seen the risks our national security space enterprise faces from well-organized, state-backed competition that operates without oversight or respect for the environment both here on Earth and in space. We are unable to restrict or regulate our adversaries. We can only out-innovate them." His letter underscores the FAA's pivotal role in advancing U.S. leadership in the commercial space sector, especially as it pertains to Starship. Self expressed his disappointment with the FAA's approach. "I am disappointed that the FAA appears to have been swayed by false narratives from the national media despite the FAA's own environmental assessment that makes clear that the 25 annual launches and landings of its Starship Super Heavy launch vehicle at Starbase will result in no harm to the environment. Our national security cannot afford to let incorrect information delay American innovation." This issue extends beyond just the Flight 5 delay. Several months ago, the FAA announced it was reviewing SpaceX's proposal to increase launch frequency at Starbase and planned to hold a public meeting. However, following various debates and the CNBC incident, the meeting was canceled, causing widespread frustration. In closing, Keith Self urged the FAA to take swift action. "I strongly encourage your agency to quickly approve SpaceX's proposal to increase their launch cadence at Starbase from 5 to 25 launches a year." Following the release of this information, it garnered significant attention. Musk responded briefly to 2 tweets mentioning Congressman Self's letter, saying, "Much appreciated" and "cool." These short replies reflect Musk's growing frustration with the FAA, especially in light of recent fines against SpaceX's Falcon rockets. Personally, I fully support the views expressed by Congressman Self in his letter. What about you? Do you agree? If so, type agree in the comment section down below. And don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on SpaceX's journey, especially concerning the Starship program and the FAA. Facing growing criticism from various sides, the FAA continues to defend its handling of the Starship mission's approval process. During the September hearing, FAA Associate Administrator Kelvin Coleman explained that the complexity and changing nature of the Starship mission, with different flight configurations, necessitates modifying licenses, which lengthens the approval timeline. The FAA also previously pointed to SpaceX's frequent Falcon 9 launches as a factor, saying it lacks enough staff to process all the required licenses, including those for Starship. To address these issues, Coleman shared that the FAA is developing new tools and awaiting additional funding to increase staffing for license reviews. He also mentioned plans to establish an aerospace rulemaking committee known as SPARK later this fall to improve the Part 450 regulatory process. At the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Global Aerospace Summit on September 11th, the FAA reiterated its stance on launch licensing. Dan Murray, Executive Director of Operational Safety for the FAA's Office of Commercial Space Transportation, commented, commented, "We work very well with SpaceX. We have a very strong dialogue with them. They get the majority of our resources because they're doing the majority of the operations." Murray also argued that the schedule for Starship Flight 5 is largely set by the choices that the company makes, adding that the flight's review process is more complex because it covers a larger area than previous missions. This echoed Coleman's earlier statements about licensing modifications. The current delays are reminiscent of those SpaceX faced a year ago after Flight 1. Back then, the FAA, along with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, postponed Flight 2 until November of 2023, a move that attracted criticism from several government officials. Though some changes were made to address these issues, the FAA's regulatory approach seems to have remained largely unchanged. Critics argue that the FAA's explanations highlight several flaws in the system. If the delays are related to staffing shortages, why weren't earlier flights impacted in the same way, especially when no mishap investigations were required for this flight? By blaming Falcon 9's high launch rate, the FAA seems to have admitted that it struggles with handling rapid technological development. Moreover, the argument about modification licenses suggests resistance to change, which runs counter to SpaceX's vision of continuous progress. Musk has been vocal about the negative effects of these delays, not just on SpaceX, but on the broader U.S. aerospace industry. Musk emphasized that this slow approval process will hinder technological advancements, saying, "Unless there is significant government reform, laws and regulations will keep getting worse every year until every great endeavor, from high-speed rail between our cities to making life multiplanetary, is effectively illegal." In his tweet, Musk also touched on his political views, expressing concerns about the future of U.S. innovation without reform. While his remarks about political figures like Trump and Kamala Harris may evoke varying opinions, Musk's main point is clear: reform is critical to prevent regulatory delays from stifling progress. For now, it appears that Starship Flight 5 will be postponed for about 2 more months, keeping the public and the space industry in suspense. The delays facing SpaceX and Starship may present opportunities for competitors to catch up, with some suggesting that NASA and the FAA may be intentionally stalling SpaceX's progress. At the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Global Aerospace Summit on September 11th, several companies expressed support for the FAA, which raises questions about why only SpaceX faces such significant obstacles. Brett Alexander, Chief Revenue Officer at Firefly Aerospace, said, "We have a long-standing positive relationship with the FAA's Space Transportation Office. No major concerns about the regulation itself or how it's being implemented." Similarly, Lars Hoffman, Vice President of Government Sales at Blue Origin, noted, "It's been a very productive and constructive relationship and dialogue regarding New Glenn's approval process." This support from other companies makes it seem as though SpaceX is the outlier, consistently facing barriers with Starship's deployment. This has fueled speculation about whether the FAA and NASA are intentionally slowing down Starship to allow competitors like Blue Origin to launch first. Initially, Blue Origin's New Glenn was set to launch in December, but now their second flight featuring the Blue Ring payload has been moved to November, while Starship Flight 5 has been delayed. Launching first would undoubtedly give Blue Origin an edge in their competition with SpaceX. Looking ahead to November, the competition between Starship and New Glenn will be a defining moment. Although both companies have their strengths, many believe Starship will prevail. If SpaceX succeeds, it'd be a blow to Blue Origin and any agencies seen as favoring them. Beyond domestic competitors, China poses a serious challenge to both SpaceX and the U.S. aerospace industry as a whole. This concern was raised during the September 10th hearing, where Representative Brian Babin warned,
"I fear that at this rate, the Communist Party will launch taikonauts to the moon while U.S. industry remains tethered to Earth with red tape."
China has made rapid progress in space exploration, including lunar landings, sample returns, and the development of the ILRS program to rival NASA's Artemis mission. Their goal is to send humans to the moon by 2029 and establish a moon base by 2030, with plans extending to 2050. China's ambitions extend to Mars, the same target SpaceX is pursuing. They've accelerated their moon sample return mission from 2031 to 2028, putting pressure on NASA's Mars return sample plan. On the commercial front, Chinese companies leveraging copycat strategies are also advancing reusable rocket technologies to compete with SpaceX. Although China lags behind SpaceX, its government's unwavering support offers a significant advantage. Starship, led by SpaceX, is currently the U.S.'s best hope to outpace China's rapid advancements, but the company continues to be hindered by its own country's regulatory hurdles. Elon Musk's call for government reform is becoming increasingly urgent. Ultimately, if the U.S. is to maintain its competitive edge, these barriers must be addressed. The FAA FAA's current approach is bucking this trend, and it remains to be seen what will come next in this high-stakes space race. Now, when it comes to the FAA, there's growing reason to question their decisions, particularly when it comes to bias toward certain companies. Musk himself has pointed this out recently, drawing a direct comparison between how the FAA handles SpaceX and Boeing's Starliner program. However, it's not just Boeing that raises concerns. There's another company even more relevant to the FAA and Starship: Blue Origin and their New Glenn rocket. Blue Origin's plans have seen a series of delays as well, with the rocket's debut mission being pushed back to November, carrying the Blue Ring payload, while their mission to launch NASA's Mars spacecraft ESCAPADE has been rescheduled to the second flight in 2024. Despite these delays, Blue Origin is outlining an ambitious roadmap for New Glenn's future. Jarrett Jones, Senior Vice President for New Glenn at Blue Origin, shared during a panel at the World Space Business Week on September 16th that after the first 2 missions, the company plans to rapidly ramp up to 12 flights in 2025. If all goes well, they aim to double that cadence to 24 flights by 2026. But it's not just the frequency of launches that Blue Origin is focusing on. They're also targeting reusability, something SpaceX has pioneered. On their very first New Glenn launch, they plan to reach orbit and land the booster. This is a bold move, with CEO Dave Limp confidently stating that no one has ever achieved such a feat on their first flight. To prepare, Blue Origin recently unveiled their own drone ship earlier this month, signaling serious intent to establish a fleet of reusable rockets. Jones revealed that by the end of 2025, Blue Origin plans to have 4 boosters in rotation, and in the years to follow, they expect to build 2 to 4 more each year, with each capable of up to 25 flights. This aggressive roadmap clearly indicates Blue Origin's intention to compete with SpaceX, and interestingly, their plans might even start with New Glenn's debut flight potentially taking place before Starship Flight 5. Given this, it's hard to ignore the lack of FAA intervention in Blue Origin's case. Despite similarities in their operational cadence, only SpaceX appears to face significant regulatory hurdles. This raises a compelling question: is the FAA and other agencies deliberately slowing SpaceX to give Blue Origin a competitive edge? At least for now, the evidence leans in that direction. After all, following Blue Origin's delay of New Glenn's first flight, the FAA suddenly announced a delay for Starship Flight 5. This timing feels more than coincidental. The potential for such regulatory interference undermines the principles of fair competition, which could have serious implications for U.S. space leadership. If one company is being held back to benefit another, it could stifle innovation and hinder America's progress in space, especially in light of the competitive threats posed by other nations. So, while Blue Origin is gearing up for a series of launches with little regulatory resistance, SpaceX finds itself entangled in bureaucratic roadblocks. If this trend continues, it may not be the market or technology determining the future of U.S. aerospace, but rather agencies like the FAA. This kind of interference could have a lasting impact on America's ability to maintain its leadership in space, both in terms of commercial innovation and national security. As we wait to see the effects of the recent letter sent by Texas Congressman Keith Self, calling on the FAA to accelerate its review process for SpaceX, it's clear that the stakes are high. America's future position in space may depend not just on the technological prowess of companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin, but on whether these companies are allowed to compete on a level playing field. Only time will tell whether the necessary regulatory changes will be made, or if bias and bureaucracy will continue to hinder U.S. development and space dominance. But the FAA hasn't stopped there. In the latest update, the agency has now turned its attention to SpaceX's Falcon system, proposing a significant penalty. On the FAA's website, the agency states the Federal Aviation Administration proposes $633,009 in civil penalties against Space Exploration Technologies Corp., SpaceX for short, for allegedly failing to follow its license requirements during 2 launches in 2023 in accordance with statutorily set civil penalty guidelines. To emphasize this decision, FAA Chief Counsel Mark Nichols added, "Safety drives everything we do at the FAA, including a legal responsibility for the safety oversight of companies with commercial space transportation licenses. Failure of a company to comply with the safety requirements will result in consequences." The FAA's announcement broke down the penalty into 2 main parts. The first is up to $350,000 for 2 missions, with $175,000 for each alleged violation. The first violation occurred during a May 2023 mission. According to the FAA, SpaceX submitted a request to revise its communications plan related to its license to launch from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. The proposed proposed revisions, including adding a new launch control room at Hangar X and removing the T-2 hour readiness poll from its procedures. The second violation in June of 2023 occurred during the launch of PSN Satria. The FAA claimed SpaceX used the unapproved launch control room for the PSN Satria mission and did not conduct the required T-2 hour poll. The second penalty, proposed at up to $283,009, relates to SpaceX's use of an unapproved rocket propellant farm. The FAA explained, in July of 2023, SpaceX submitted a request to revise its explosive site plan related to its license to launch from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. The proposed revision reflected a newly constructed rocket propellant farm. On July 28th of 2023, SpaceX used the unapproved rocket propellant farm for the EchoStar 24/Jupiter mission. In conclusion, the FAA stated, SpaceX has 30 days to respond to the FAA after receiving the agency's enforcement letters. This development has sparked strong reactions from SpaceX, particularly from their CEO, Elon Musk himself. Musk expressed his frustration by stating, "I am highly confident that Discovery will show improper, politically motivated behavior by the FAA." He further highlighted the underlying issue by responding to a tweet from Marcus House, saying, "The fundamental problem is that humanity will forever be confined to the Earth unless there is radical reform at the FAA." Musk didn't stop there, emphasizing that the FAA is becoming a significant obstacle for the aerospace industry. In another tweet, he said, "NASA puts their faith in SpaceX for all astronaut transport to and from the space station, but somehow FAA leadership thinks they know better." Musk's comments are based on a firm foundation. SpaceX is currently NASA's primary partner in transporting both crew and cargo to the International Space Station. Without SpaceX's involvement, the US might still be reliant on Russia for maintaining its space operations. Yet, despite this critical role, the FAA seems intent on imposing restrictions on SpaceX, seemingly unappreciative of the company's contributions to the space industry. The FAA's latest criticisms revolve around claims that SpaceX moved forward with certain steps before receiving the agency's formal approval. This, in turn, exposes the FAA's sluggishness in the approval process, something that congressional officials have also criticized recently. SpaceX's success has been built upon rapid innovation and frequent launches. Reusability, in particular, has been key to their achievements, a concept still elusive to many other companies. Following the recent Galileo mission, SpaceX tweeted, "Rapid and reliable reusability is key to making life multiplanetary. Every mission is an opportunity to learn and inform future missions." At this point, FAA regulations seem to be the biggest obstacle standing in the way of SpaceX's goals. Starship's launch was delayed until November, and for Falcon 9, despite no issues affecting mission success, the FAA imposed additional restrictions. In just 2 months, July and August, issues concerning the second stage and landing prompted the FAA to call for a halt in launches for assessments. When considering the proposed penalties, many see them as unjust, especially in comparison to other companies like Boeing. Musk pointed out this discrepancy, saying, "Amazingly, no Starliner fines for Boeing. The FAA Space Division is harassing SpaceX about nonsense that doesn't affect safety while giving a free pass to Boeing even after NASA concluded that their spacecraft was not safe enough to bring back the astronauts. There needs to be resignations from the FAA leadership." Indeed, when Boeing's Starliner faced issues during its mission to the ISS, the FAA remained silent, seemingly turning a blind eye to the problems. It's expected that if NASA grants Starliner a crew launch license, the FAA will raise no objections. This favoritism towards Boeing, a longtime government contractor, stands in stark contrast to the scrutiny SpaceX faces. Perhaps in a bold move to address these regulatory obstacles, Musk recently announced SpaceX will be filing suit against the FAA for regulatory overreach. While this lawsuit may not have been SpaceX's desired course of action, Musk has noted lawfare is abuse of the system. The constant roadblocks may have pushed the company to take this drastic step. The coming months could see a major legal battle between SpaceX and the FAA, a struggle between a forward-moving private company and a regulatory body that seems to be holding back progress. Whether SpaceX will succeed in this lawsuit remains to be seen, especially with the FAA receiving support from multiple government agencies. What do you think about the FAA's actions and SpaceX's response? Is it time for regulatory reforms in the aerospace industry? If you agree, leave a yes in the comments section, and don't forget to like, share the video, and subscribe to stay updated on SpaceX's incredible journey toward the stars. Despite facing challenges, SpaceX continues to set new records with the Falcon 9, most recently during the Galileo mission. On September 17th at 6:50 p.m. EDT, a Falcon 9 launched 2 spacecraft for Europe's Galileo navigation system from SLC-40, and that's in Florida, by the way. After a successful liftoff, the Falcon 9's first stage returned to Earth, landing on the SpaceX drone ship Just Read the Instructions about 8.5 minutes after launch. Meanwhile, the rocket's upper stage carried 2 Galileo satellites towards medium Earth orbit, with deployment expected roughly 3.5 hours after launch. The Galileo system, Europe's equivalent to the United States GPS, operates at an altitude of 14,430 miles or 23,222 kilometers. This mission marked several significant milestones for SpaceX. As SpaceX stated in its mission description, this was the 22nd flight of the first stage booster supporting this mission, referencing booster B-1067. After encountering issues with the booster B-1062, SpaceX has been improving its systems, pushing the boundaries of rocket reusability. This marks SpaceX's 90th mission of the year, drawing the company closer to its previous record of 91 Falcon 9 flights set last year. Moreover, it is a key step towards SpaceX's ambitious goal of completing 148 missions in a single year. This launch is also the 375th Falcon 9 mission overall, a significant achievement. The unique aspect of this mission was its high orbit, which made the task even more remarkable. In a previous Galileo mission earlier this year, SpaceX chose not to recover the booster due to the higher performance requirements of the payload's orbit. However, for this flight, the booster was successfully recovered. As SpaceX explained, during the Galileo L-12 mission earlier this year, the Falcon 9 booster was expended to provide the additional performance needed to deliver the payload to its orbit. Data from that mission informed subtle design and operational changes, including mass reductions and trajectory adjustments that will allow us to safely recover and reuse this booster. The company added, Falcon 9 is ready to safely deliver Galileo L-13 to orbit and return to the Just Read the Instructions drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. They acknowledged that this recovery attempt would be a challenge due to higher heating and dynamic pressure on the booster during re-entry. Despite these elevated conditions, the landing was considered a crucial test, offering valuable data for future vehicle designs. These insights will help SpaceX further improve the robustness and reusability of its rockets under increasingly challenging conditions. This mission also underscores the importance of reusability for SpaceX's broader goals, as mentioned in the discussion regarding the FAA. Moreover, it represents a significant victory for SpaceX in the European space market. The Galileo constellation, which now consists of 30 satellites, was initially launched by Russia's Soyuz rockets and ESA's Ariane 5. However, due to geopolitical tensions with Russia and delays with Ariane 6, Europe had to turn to SpaceX. Europe agreed to pay $196 million for 2 Falcon 9 missions, 30% above SpaceX's standard launch cost of $67 million per flight. The first launch occurred in April, and the most recent mission marked the second. This reliance on SpaceX highlights its dominance over competitors in the space industry. As SpaceX continues to break barriers and set new standards, such achievements provide the foundation for overcoming obstacles like those posed by the FAA. The road ahead promises to be eventful, and it will be interesting to see how these developments unfold. Well, folks, that's about it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always, this has been Kevin from Great SpaceX. Until next time, keep looking up.